Jupiter was previously in Gemini for an entire year with its classic annual transit. It exited in early June, and then in early July, we have two ingresses into this sign. The first was Venus on July 4th, and the second is just a few days later on July 7th, and that is Uranus entering Gemini at 3:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're going to have these two planets right next to each other. Venus is one of the closer planets to the sun, which means it's going to move pretty quickly. Uranus is going to move very, very slowly, not get very far, and have to do its annual, pretty much every 5 to 6 month retrograde later this year. And it will exit Gemini and then re-enter again in 2026. So all of the outer planets, you heard me talking about this with Neptune. It's also going to be happening with Saturn. All of these planets, it's just about when the retrograde is happening, they happen to be right by that line, and it pushes them back over again, and then they will re-enter. So Uranus, as another outer planet, it is significant whenever Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are changing signs, because when they lock in, they are locked in for many years. And these are huge chapters and shifts for the collective. So let's talk a little bit more about this transit. Uranus represents revolution and innovation. Uranus is about change. It's upheaval. It's very big energy. We always want to be paying attention to what Uranus is doing. And with Gemini, Gemini is studious, intellectual, very people-focused, loves to chat, talk, teach, write, and understand all sides of an issue. Uranus was previously in Taurus from May 18th, 2018, a while ago, to November 6th of the same year. That was its preview period. That's basically what we're going to be doing right now with Uranus and Gemini, is we're going to have a preview period, and then it's going to lock in. So it did the same exact thing with Taurus from May to November of 2018. It had a preview period in Taurus, and then in March of 2019, on the 6th of March, it then locked in, and it was in Taurus for 17 years. So that's what I mean when I say these outer planets changing signs. It's a big deal. It's a big deal because it's entering a almost 20-year-long chapter. It's a long period, and what is especially notable about the time that we are living in, and I've mentioned this in some other classes, but having Pluto changing signs, having Uranus changing signs, having Neptune changing signs, and all of that happening over the course of 12 months does not happen. This is not a thing that we have seen. One, none of us have lived it, but also it's not a thing that has really happened in history, that they have changed so quickly. So not only is each of them changing signs indicative of some sort of fundamental change, but for Uranus in particular, it's about change. It's about having shifts, doing things new and in a different way. So it's doubling down on the general imagery of when an outer planet enters a new sign. So the reputation of Uranus in Gemini, because all we really can do is look back because we haven't lived this before, it coincides with innovation, naturally, in communication and technology. How are we communicating with each other? And when you fold technology in, well, we change how we communicate now because we have phones, we have computers. So that's an example, hence why it's folded in. Also, collective shifts in thinking, because Gemini is an air sign. It's ruled by Mercury. How are we thinking? How are we teaching? Very big for Gemini. It has coincided with shifts in our education systems, the dissemination of information, as well as social practices, because Gemini is about relationships and how we're interacting with each other. So it could be shifts in social norms or conduct. So a lot of really big picture ideas, and who knows exactly what's going to emerge from all of this. Also, there is a track record for Uranus and Gemini to usher in new words. So the coining of new terms. I know that happens all the time, but like there being especially a boom in coining new terms, as well as decoding maybe ancient texts or artifacts. So it's understanding what something means. So we're unlocking language. As well as, interestingly enough, youth revolutions. So younger people becoming more engaged in change, which love to hear that. And it could even mean younger people stepping into more roles of authority and taking charge. And finally, associated with modes of transportation. So again, ruled by Mercury, how are we getting from here to there? So of course, we've had a lot of different discussions around electric cars, automated self-driving cars. So maybe this is a time where that happens. Maybe there's something that we haven't even considered, that a different mode of transportation emerges during this time. Politically, it's also associated with conflict. So we have the American Civil War and the US entrance into World War II. Both happened when Uranus was in Gemini. So also things to think about, because we have that with Neptune and Aries as well, a wartime association. So this is one of the reasons why astrologers like myself have known going into 2025 that all of these outer planets were changing signs, the significations of what all of these outer planet ingresses have symbolized. So we have been mentally preparing for this. And as we have witnessed the escalation of different wars and conflicts and bombings and all that stuff around the world, obviously not great, but at least we were kind of prepared. So because we knew this was coming, it's like, well, there's that signature. Yet again, the pattern repeats. So it's allowed me to kind of view this in a I don't know, slightly separate way, where I'm like, oh, well, I'm expecting that sometime between these months, there's going to be conflict and issues. And then, of course, it transpires. And it's like, oh, this is so weird. So being able to see the astrology play out. And of course, this is based on decades, hundreds of years of patterns and cycles over time that we have witnessed this. How it shakes out, we don't know. And of course, if we want to consider here as an example that, for Uranus and Gemini, if it's change, it's revolution, and one part of it is that younger people are taking a very important role. And then we're pairing that, we're overlapping it with the fact that Neptune entering Aries signals also conflict and kind of a changing of the guard when you have empires ending. Then in some ways they work in tandem with each other. And it just so happens that these are coinciding around the same timeline. So it will also be tricky to know what is specifically tied to what, unless unless we're carving out, oh, this is more related to health innovation rather than language innovation. Then we can parse out some of the differences between the two of them. But these are big, notable, heavy chapters. So this is why I don't share all of this lightly, and it's something that we're going to keep coming back to and thinking about for quite a long period of time. So with that, I'm going to rattle off the dates so we can orient ourselves around this transit. So we have July 7th, Uranus entering Gemini. Then September 6th of this year, it stations retrograde. So it's only in there for a couple months, doesn't get very far, stations retrograde. Re-enters Taurus on November 7th, a couple months later. And then it will station direct in February 2026 on the 3rd. Uranus re-enters Gemini on April 25th, 2026. And it will remain there until August 3rd, 2032, which is 6 full years. So yes, not as long as Neptune changing signs, Pluto changing signs, but also not as long as the fact that it was in Taurus for 17 years. This can be explained by how the planets are moving in the ecliptic, moving around the Earth, that it hits certain points and it spends a little bit less time there. And honestly, it's probably going to feel more pleasant, if you will, for us, that the revolution cannot last as long. If we were just in revolution mode, plus what's happening with Neptune, which is also big change and upheaval and wartime energy, if this Uranus and Gemini is only 6 years rather than 17, like what we had with Uranus in Taurus, I think it'll be enough. It'll be enough for us. But we are going to be living through the preview period for the next several months, dipping back in, formally closing that Uranus and Taurus chapter, and then moving into the next 6 years. When we're talking about Uranus, we are really predominantly thinking about what's going on with the collective. But for us, we can contextualize in how are we wanting to change. We want to bring change into this Gemini part of our chart. So I can give an example for myself. I have Gemini in my 12th house. So that is the soul work, introspection house. Just had Jupiter there for an entire year. So over the last year, all of us were expanding in Gemini, whatever that life area is. So it's like, okay, great. I'm building, I'm creating, I am introspecting a lot. And now we're going to be entering this much, much longer era of our lives where we are overhauling. So we've expanded and now we're going to keep going. We're going to start tearing some things down and then really building more. So we may have just come up with some ideas, Gemini. We might have just generated some ideas in this area of life over the last year, but we're going to be executing. We are going to be really doing things differently. So then when we come out on the other side and it is August 4th and beyond in 2032, we'll feel like completely different people in the context of that area of our lives. So for me, 12th house, how I approach introspection, how I approach my soul work, how I face my means of self-sabotage and undoing, how I deal with isolation, all of that being not just reevaluated, we're not just thinking about it, we are overhauling it. We are building new systems. Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, so we can draw the connection there as well. It's wanting to create new systems that work better, that are different, that trigger change. Hey, Carrie. Roseanne, first house. I was talking about the 12th house. The house right after that is the first house. So fundamentally, who you are as a person. How are you rebuilding your sense of self? It could also be your appearance. So maybe you're changing your appearance a lot during this period of time. You're overhauling, if you will. But it's your sense of self. It's how you're evaluating. Who am I? What do I bring to the table? It's very, very extensive, deep look into what makes you not just who you are, but like how you can up level, how you can make the change that maybe you've wanted to. This is giving you the push to do that. Seventh house, opposite of the first house. So seventh house is looking at those committed partnerships and relationships. So maybe it could be starting new ones, could be starting new partnerships. And then just evaluating ones that you have that maybe aren't working and saying, okay, we're revolting. We're kicking this up and we're going to make something that is better, that's newer, that is more with the times. Gemini in the eighth house. So eighth house is looking at mental health, death and rebirth, transformation, like what we just talked about. Kind of Pluto themes are tied to the eighth house, as well as shared resources, joint resources, inheritance, like wills, things that you're receiving from other people. So having change and innovation in an area that is also infused with rebirth. Big 6 years, Nina, to be evolving. So similar to first house, and first house is like, who am I? That's really weighty. Eighth house is very similar. And it's like, what's going on with my mental health? What are my practices? How am I receiving money from other people? What am I losing? What am I shedding? What am I giving away? And how am I reemerging from the ashes? Really loaded time period to evolve, which is what we're being asked to do.